Welcome to the Circle of Success. I am your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Bill Coletti with me. Bill, how you doing?
Brett, I'm terrific. Excited for a wonderful conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you. I know you get your Florida State Seminoles helmet back there. So you coming from the great state of Florida right now?
Absolutely. Grew up in Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area, and then spent a good bit of time in Tallahassee.
Okay. Now you a Buccaneers fan?
Absolutely. Long suffering Buccaneers fan, season ticket holder way back in the day when we had orange unis and Owen whatever we were for a
Man.
really long time in the 70s. But now everybody's a Bucs fan.
Oh yeah, I'm a Bucks fan now. But I mean, so what was it like when you heard the news? Bucks signed Tom Brady. What were you thinking?
I was skeptical at the time. I didn't know if it was him or if it was the system. And so, that 2 years ago or
Yeah.
so, you had that coin toss. Was it Belichick or was it Brady?
Yeah.
And was he a tool or was he the it? And obviously he's kind of the it. It's the Belichick system. There's no knock in the Belichick system. The
No.
system has to have players, but it was amazing. And it was wonderful over the course of the year just to see the development. That those first 4 games were a little clunky chunky.
Yeah. Well, think about it too. I mean, I honestly think it's one of the best. I know some people hate Brady, but I mean, you got to respect what the guy's done. And you look at the fact that he comes to a new team, right? New division, don't get to have their normal, stuff because of COVID.
Oh yeah.
And they just kind of get thrown into it. And I remember people saying, look, this guy's going to figure it out by the time the end of the year comes.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. So it was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
He did.
So I like that. And then I was also
exciting.
at the game, and I think it was in 1998 maybe, when our St. Louis Rams, former St. Louis Rams, beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
I was at that game. So
that was terrific.
well, good, man. Well, thanks for being with us. You are a business owner. Your company is called Kith, which we'll talk about that later. And you're also the author of Critical Moments, A New Mindset for Reputation Management. So we'll have a lot of great things to talk about, I'm sure. But kind of give us a background. Who is Bill Coletti? What's made you the man you are today?
Yeah, well, my mom and dad made me who I am today, and certainly an unabashedly fanboy of the journey that my mom and dad set me on. And so started doing politics. I ran political campaigns. First worked on my first race as a senior in high school, and then carried that up back to Tallahassee, which is the state capital in Florida, and did politics there. And then just ran progressively larger races and did that in the 80s and the 90s. And then ran some statewide races, and then made a decision. The girl I was dating at the time had an opportunity in Eastern Europe and Bulgaria. And so I moved to Bulgaria for 5 years and worked on a number of things over there, started the American Chamber of Commerce, and then ultimately wound up working for the Prime Minister and helping him set up a communication structure similar to what we have at a White House structure, where you have a strategic director of communications and then a more tactical spokesperson. So we set that up all as sort of precursor for Bulgaria to join NATO and the EU, which to become more aligned to the east or to the west, as opposed to where they were previously aligned with Russia. And then I came home, ran another campaign in 2000, and then started a corporate consulting career. So from 2000 until now, I ran a big global practice for a big public relations firm, and then 7 years been doing it on my own.
Nice. And so what did you learn? So obviously being over there in Bulgaria in a different culture, right? So what did you learn about cultures that you can apply to the business world today?
That it is just absolutely critical to have a perspective bigger than your neighborhood. I think it is critical that you have to have a big global perspective to understand the why of a lot of different things. And we can understand, just take post-Trump presidency and the seeds of the Tea Party movement. You can learn a lot about that by tracking some of that of what happened in Europe prior to that. And so I think there's a lot of cultural understanding, but more importantly, understanding of yourself and why we do things the way we do. And that it also kind of, while I certainly believe in American greatness, we're not the only ones that got it figured out. There are other countries in the world that are doing some pretty great things. And I think a little bit of humility, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, you can learn from a lot of people too, right? I mean, I think learning is a big deal as a leader.
Absolutely.
And I'm assuming you can go there and learn from other cultures and bring that back to your own culture.
Absolutely. And, so one of the things you learn there is it's just the critical importance of family, and that people take care of their families. And it's not that we don't do that here, but it is a primary component of that. You also learn that Bulgaria, as a particular country, has really been battered around. I mean, there were 7 different governing authorities, from the Romans to the Turks to the Russians and the Germans, and so there are lots of invaders and conquerors of Bulgaria. We never had that. We've had this sort of monolithic sense of destiny in the United States, and Bulgaria had to be really resilient, and they remade themselves any number of times. And so there's a lot of success stories to be learned from that. But the one big takeaway is family. It was a big takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's kind of turn the page here a little bit and talk about communication. Obviously, you're an expert at that, and I think it's important. It's always important, right, to communicate, whether that's in your marriage, with your kids, with your work people. But what is it about communication to you when you hear that word sticks out when you think about being a trusted advisor, right? Like Visionary Wealth Advisors, we are a wealth management firm, and we are a trusted advisor to our clients. And so take the wealth management space, whether it's an attorney, a doctor, whoever it may be, what's the most important thing when you think about communication and being a trusted advisor?
Yeah, it's terrific. I love that question. So there's an amazing book written by David Maister, and Maister really sort of tried to deconstruct the professional service wisdom giving, which is what all those disciplines you just described, including yourself and what we do. Wrote a book called Trusted Advisor. And he really tried to unpack what are the key elements of being a trusted advisor. And he talked about this concept of it's a math equation. And I'll paraphrase it for brevity's sake. I think becoming a trusted advisor begins with being really clear and honest with yourself. I think you got to know and understand yourself first, and understand our own head trash and understand our own limitations, because we convince and talk ourselves out of giving really good advice very often because, well, people are going to think that's naive, or they've already thought of that, so I'm not going to share that. So the Maister model is all built over self-awareness. And then above self-awareness is trust. You get trust by being credible. And so, Brett, you've built trust over your career by giving consistent doubles and maybe the occasional triple and rarely a home run for your clients. But you have been credible and consistent by delivering good, prudent, sound advice. So that's a key component to that. Other one is intimacy. And great leaders and great advisors are intimate. They're willing to be transparent and honest and say, I don't know if they don't know, and say, I'll research that. So there's this intimacy of not BSing people that's there. And then the last part is really truly being a subject matter expert. And so I could not be a family practice doctor because I just don't have those skill sets. But I can do what I do and you can do what you do. And so you truly have to always be sharpening the saw and understanding market. And so when someone asks you about Bitcoin or whatever the weird thing is of the day, you've got credibility and the ability and the expertise to do that. So trust is built from the subject matter knowledge, which you're the thing you really do, this intimacy, willing to be vulnerable and willing to sort of connect with people at a human level. And then the credibility of consistency, of consistently delivering that, all, even if it's a math problem, over self-awareness and really a deep understanding of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. So know yourself first, building the trust, intimacy, willingness to be transparent, huge, right?
Yeah.
Which I think, let's stop there for a second. I think that's hard sometimes for men. Maybe it is for women, I don't know. But I think as men, we don't want to be so vulnerable and transparent sometimes because we think it can come across weak. So what are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. And then let me just add to that. We fake it with BS, and most people see right through it. And I'm talking about, and what I do is, we do crisis communication. So we are dealing with leaders that it's the worst day of their career or the worst season of their career. And this is things that could jeopardize certainly their job at the enterprise that they're at, or significant shareholder return, whatever metric is most relevant to them.
Yeah.
And people are pretty good at seeing through the BS when you're really struggling, and I think that's why that intimacy is really important. And so much of what I do is tactical advice, but it's also almost ministerial. It's just being present for someone in a moment of need. I'm not going to solve it. I'm not going to fix it immediately, but I'm present for people. And that's what people
Yeah.
really seem to value. So that's where
Yeah.
that intimacy comes in.
I love it. And then the fourth one you said was be a subject matter expert. And so I love that. I say be a student of the game. And so what is it that you do, kind of walk us through maybe the daily or the weekly or the monthly habits for you to stay at the top of your deal and keep sharpening your saw?
Yeah, I love it. So I have just over the past 3 years really embraced a morning practice. So I have a morning ritual and a morning routine, and there's this great book by Hal Eldridge called Miracle Morning, and he talks about
Phenomenal.
this thing called Savers. And so for me, because I need to be in crisis response, I need to be the center of the spinning wheel. So there's a lot of crap going on around me. I need to be that centered place. So I'll answer your direct question on subject matter expertise, but really, I believe subject matter expertise begins with my stillness. I've got a meditation practice, which I really appreciate. I've got a lot of affirmation that I do. All of this kind of comes from Hal and the work from that Miracle Morning. After that is I'm always learning and listening. I mean, there's the great sources of podcasts and guys like you that are talking about with innovative people that are taking just a little bit of a key take, a different perspective on something, Harvard Business Review and, the Idea Cast. I mean, there's lots of different innovations. There's in the communications world, public relations broadly defined, there is not a very good straight line from academia to application. Healthcare and other industries, there's a pretty straight line. And even in your industry, there's a lot of really good academic information that makes its way into decision making. Communications doesn't really do that, but I think there's a lot to learn as people study the public and public behavior. So I actually have an interesting little Google Scholar search set up when keywords pop up, is that I try to dip into that. It's difficult reading, as you know, any of that academic stuff. I would much rather read the pamphlet. But those are three things: this meditation and stillness practice, just pop culture. I guess I would put Harvard into that sort of pop culture reading, but then could sort of have this sort of scholarly, try to dip into that every now and then.
Yeah, I love that. I'm the same way with the meditation, affirmation, get some good exercise in the morning, right? So, but what does that look like? Do you have a spot in your house? Is it the same spot every time? Is it going to be changed?
It's the same spot, same routine. And so my wife and I have a very, very structured. So we get up early, we enjoy coffee in bed, and we have this meditation practice. And then, we get up at 5:30. And so by 6:45, 7, we are 4 out of 7 days we're on the bike. And so we've both a combination of Peloton and some homebrew stuff that I make up just to sort of stress us out even further. So we're on the bike, and then Saturday's a long ride. So we'll go ride long. And during the winter, that's usually what we call a movie ride. We'll just pop in a movie and just watch a movie. And then 2 times a week, it's with weights, and then yoga and stretching on a Sunday before church. And so we are very, very programming. And it's nice with your partner to wake up. It's not what are we going to do today? It's when are you ready to go? I mean, what needs to happen. So we know every Wednesday, today's tempo. And so we do tempo work on Wednesday. We do hard on Tuesday, Friday, and we go long on Saturday. So we know, and then 2 other days where I'm lifting, and my wife is doing something that she enjoys personally. The lifting is kind of a lonely, singular activity. You can't really do that as a group. That's hard to do as a group sport, I've found.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's
very
great,
structured,
right?
very structured.
And I think there's accountability there, what I'm hearing too,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's one thing to show up by yourself, and there's a lot of people that are disciplined to do that, but there's also that thing that, this beautiful lady's right next to you, and it's going to be, hey, I got to get up, or she's nudging you. It's time to get up, right?
Absolutely. And it's nice to know when you wake up Tuesday morning, we're riding, short hard. And that's just, I love the clarity of that. People have critiqued that it's boring or static. I mean, that's what the long ride is for. We're out roaming around different rides in the hill country here. We live in Central Texas. So that's what that's for. But it's work. I mean, it's not, so I don't need to mix it up for the sake of mixing it up. It's a purpose.
I like it. So let's talk about, you said earlier, maybe it was even before we started recording, but leading, but yet challenging, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we want to lead and it's hard to challenge that person, but at the same time, great leaders can also challenge. So walk us through that.
Yeah, so it's in the context back to where we were about trusted advisors. And I think your work and the other industries that you picked, lawyers, accountants, um, other professional services, people that earn their income by serving others,
Yep.
is that there's this dichotomy that I've observed is that you typically have people, and it's very age related, but not universally age, but it's early in people's career. They do what I call serve and respond. And so they're order takers. Someone runs in and says to you and a financial advisor or someone else, we need more, Apple in our portfolio. The serve and respond advisor says, yep, how many shares you want, or whatever the context might be. As we progress in our careers and our confidence progresses, our self-awareness progresses, our ability to be intimate, that's when we lead and challenge our clients and say, hey, I understand that you want more Apple, but have you thought about this and how the implications of that or whatnot? And so I view, and what I ask people that I work with is, am I serving, responding, or am I leading and challenging my clients and those around me? And so I toggle as a leader of my firm. I toggle between both of those. I serve and respond. People tell me what to do. We need a piece of content. You got to be here at 10 o'clock. You got to do this thing. And I just do what I do. I serve and respond. There is often where my greatest role is to lead and challenge. And that's the same thing for my clients. I try to get out of serve and responding for my clients. And I would know what we get paid for is leading and challenging. So serve and respond would look like, writing a press release, writing a speech, writing talking points, doing a study about social media or something like that. I've got people that do that. That's not what I do. I take that and then lead and challenge people with that information.
I love that too. I mean, that serve and respond, like you said in your example, the Apple's, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Client, you want 100 shares, you want 1,000 shares, right? And it's just, I don't think you're adding value there.
You're just taking an order. You might as well be
an order,
McDonald's.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And I can't tell you how many. And you said it earlier, like whether it's Bitcoin or when all this crazy stuff's going on in the markets, it's everybody's got an idea. And I think our advisors work really hard to know the client, ask the questions, and do what they need to do, because that's where, in my opinion, you do become the trusted advisor, and that's how you earn your keep.
But do you agree that there's this with your group, with your advisors? Do you think there is an age or an experience axis? Is that we all start at serve and respond because of the
100%.
Fear of losing clients? I don't want to piss off Mr. and
I don't
Mrs.
want to piss
Jones.
that guy off, right?
Yeah.
No,
as opposed to
absolutely.
saying Bitcoin's stupid. Which
Yeah.
what you might say as a lead and challenge.
Yeah, no, I connected when you said that earlier. I think it definitely, as you're in the business longer, you have more confidence, but you also have the reasonings why. And you're a student of the game, right? You sharpen your saw and you know exactly why we have that much Apple versus, okay, yeah, let's just add to it, right?
Yeah. Can you accelerate that in your experience? Can you accept? So we've got a really up and coming 25, 30-year-old. They're ready to roll, but they still are serve and respond out of fear. Can we as leaders accelerate their courage and confidence so that they don't have to wait till they're 40?
I think so. And the reason I say that is I've been an advisor. This is the only thing I've ever done. And so now, being a founder and co-founder and a CEO of a firm and still an advisor, but back when I was 22, 23 years old, I was scared to death, right? But the way I did that, the way I made that go faster was now I can say this because I'm the gray-haired guy, but I always took the gray-haired guys with me in my early 20s, right? And I would sit down and I would watch them and how they would work with clients. And I wouldn't write down what the client or prospect said. I would write down what the advisor said. And, this guy said that in this meeting. Well, here's how the advisor responded, or she said this, and here's what he did. And then I would study that and I would learn that. And then I think for me, it helped me grow faster to where I was in my late 20s and getting into leadership and starting to become a managing director of a firm. And I would say, that happened because I started to get confidence. I busted out of my comfort zone. I call them comfort zone calluses. And I would see somebody do that and not like, I was like, oh, he just said that. And the client came back and respected it. Well, it made my comfort zone be a little bit bigger. And then a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. Until then, you had the ability to go out and do it on your own.
Yeah, and then from what we do in a communications context, our promise is if you work with us in this journey of becoming a trusted advisor, The promise is you now become the place that your leadership takes their most difficult challenges. And that's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to do that. I'm sure you know plenty of advisors that are happy taking orders and that they've made careers out of taking orders. It's not what I want to do, and I don't think it's what you want to do.
Yeah, no.
But I do, as we become trusted advisors, I want to be the place that the leader takes their most difficult challenge. That's what I want. And in a sports context, I want the ball at the top of the key. That's not everybody. Not everybody doesn't want the ball, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a criticism. I think you would agree with that. That's not
100%.
Not a criticism, but you got to make sure somebody wants the ball when there's 2 seconds left or whatever the metaphor.
Absolutely. And I think it's good knowing that about your own team at work too, right? Is who wants the ball and those that may not want the ball. I mean, look at John Paxson and Steve Kerr and people like that for the Chicago Bulls, right? They weren't the guy that had the ball at the top of the key, but they've made a hell of a living and have a lot of memories.
And they were the last pass.
Or the number 3.
They made the last pass and they get the assist.
Or made some key shots that nobody talks about because they want to talk about Jordan stuff. So
exactly.
It's good to have that in every team. So let's talk about you. Obviously, we've used the word crisis a lot. You've worked with people on, like you said, their worst day probably ever, right? And so maybe somebody listens going through that, but maybe somebody just had a bad day, right? It's not maybe newsworthy, but for them, it knocked them off the horse a little bit, right? So what advice would you have for people from a mindset and an emotional standpoint, how to get through really, really tough days or a really tough time?
Yeah. Terrific question. So I believe in this phrase, and I read it from someone. It was a church that was going through a really, really difficult time. And this is what someone shared. He said, the crucible of crisis doesn't develop your skill set, it reveals it. And so when you are going through that moment, and even if it is a benign bad day, you've lost some clients or whatever the situation is, and it's a bad day, it is really clear how you respond, listen, and trust your gut, trust your instincts. And so get back on the horse and get going. That's all real cliche. But the thing for what I do, and this is a little outside of just bad day, is that if you subscribe that the crucible of crisis doesn't develop your skill set, it reveals it, you got to practice. So back to the Jordan analogy, he practiced catching and releasing with as short amount of time as possible. And that was practice, so that when he was in that crisis, if you will, what was revealed, he liked what he saw. Yeah. So the way I talk about it for organizations is that the key difference in crisis, when you have a crisis, is speed. How fast do you respond? So let's say you're losing a bunch of clients, or maybe someone accuses you of sexual harassment, or there's just something real that's going on. The speed at which you fill the marketplace with information, with what your side of the story or exactly what happened, that's the key differentiator between good and great. The way you get fast is having crystal clarity around your mission and values, plus an understanding of your chain of command. And so if we just take this hypothetical company, something bad happens to this hypothetical company. They need to not dither around thinking about what really matters most. What is their mission? What is their values? So many clients that come to me don't know what matters most, and they don't have clarity around what they really stand for, their reason for being. They're just selling widgets because that's all they've ever done, is selling widgets. So they don't really understand their reason for being. And we all poo-poo that, and we all roll our eyes at mission and values and all that kind of silliness. But in a critical moment, if your skill sets are revealed, knowing mission and values is really critically important. Second is more of a practical application. It's your chain of command. Who am I going to go to? Who do I trust? Who am I going to get advice from when this happens? Is it inside counsel, outside counsel? Is it a trusted board member? Is it my CFO, my chief operating officer? Understanding that and exercising that. So when it's revealed, you know, I'm going to trust Brett. Brett's going to give me the advice. Paul, he's not up for this. He doesn't want the ball at the top of the key. He's just not in the room when that choice is made. But Mary, she gets our employees and she understands the long term. So she's on the team. And so it's exercising and practicing those things. So speed is the key differentiator when people are having these crises. The way you get fast is knowing what you stand for and knowing who you talk to. That's how you get fast.
That's phenomenal. I love that process. And so talk about the emotional side of that though too, because okay, great. I got my communication out. I know my mission and vision. I know my team, but now I'm at home alone after dinner and I'm like, holy crap, right? My world is crumbling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah. And that's when that ministerial part of what I do, because I get those calls at 7 o'clock. We've issued the statement, we've done the press release, we've done the whatever. And we watched it. We watched the 6 o'clock news and said, okay, we did okay.
Yeah.
Now what? It is a lot about that self-orientation and blame is such a toxic chemical is when we look at blame and there's self-blame. But what I really try to do is we're dealing with crises and often it is not the actions of one person. So sexual harassment, and if you've got a leader that has done some bad things, they need to sit in that blame and they need to sit and own that space. But if there was a manufacturing facility that blew up, or there was something bad that happened, you owning that blame personally is not particularly relevant to me. I don't think that's really important. I think what you need to do is apologize, fix it, and get back to strategy as fast as you can. There's really not much room for self-wallowing. And so depending upon the situation, when I get that call, it's called 7-8 o'clock at the end of the day, is that I really want organizations to apologize, fix it, and get back on plan as fast as they can. And denial and saying, well, maybe it's not me, or maybe it's not that bad, or maybe nobody's going to find out. That is not a part of apologize, fix it, and get back on strategy. Yeah. And too often companies do that.
Yeah. And I think too, you mentioned the company earlier, but I've got a couple of their pieces of exercise equipment at home. And recently they had to do a recall, right, with their treadmill. Yeah. And absolutely. I'm not an expert, but they communicated with me very quickly. They fixed the problem if you wanted to fix the problem, right? Mm-hmm. And they have over communicated, I think, since with some emails and some things like that. So I think that's probably a good process. Would you agree? Or is that some
opportunity? It was a good process once they did it. They were slow because you had governmental, I was FTC, I believe. FTC a little bit forced their hand. And so they were behind the curve on that. So yes, and it's great that that's your observation and that's your perspective. That's what they're counting on. I think from my vantage point, they were kind of a half a step behind in a macro context. Now, does that matter? All it really matters is your memory and your perspective as a customer or an observer. That's really what matters, not my sort of fine tuning. It's a little bit like appreciating art. A lot of people appreciate it and other people sort of get, don't like the way the eye is painted or something like that. So, but they were a little bit delayed. They were a little slow.
Thought it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is an instinct.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, we talk about mindset and behaviors on here all the time. So leader one, great mindset, great behaviors. We know those. Leader two, struggling a little bit. What advice do you have for that guy struggling to get to being the top leader that he wants to be?
Yeah, those are challenging situations because they have the mantle of leadership in that moment. If they maintain that position, they will not keep it. They cannot keep that leadership. And so what I do a lot of is that I need to generate action. I need to get companies to do something, whether that be an apology or fire somebody or make amends in some way. They need to take affirmative action. Is one of the most effective things I do is just sort of paint a picture. You convince people with sort of fear or the promise of a promised land. Is that you really use fear. I say, if we don't do this, here are going to be the consequences. It's a New York Times article. It's going to be a really difficult board meeting where you're going to have to explain why you didn't do anything, and then you're probably going to get fired. Or we can do this, and this is what that promised land looked like. That chasm is painful. You are going to have to get over that chasm. So I try to use storytelling. I use either promised land or fear to try to convince. To the root of your question is a coaching and self-improvement. In my practice, that's a day 2 activity. That's not a day one activity. Day
Okay.
one, I'm on the battlefield triaging, kind of packing the wound. Now
You're
is
stopping the
not
bleeding.
stopping the bleeding, and that is not the time to talk about diet and exercise. Okay,
Yeah,
we're
good point.
like packing the wound, and so I talk a lot about sort of cardiology and issues around that. Is that a lot of what I do is just emergency room physician type of stuff. We'll eventually get to talk about that. To your point about coaching, I use that same fear or promised land parable, and that seems to be a really effective way for people to understand that. And at a very practical level, I have mocked up newspaper articles with real headlines and 2 or 3 paragraphs of copy that says, CEO Brett, are you ready to see this article? Because this is what's coming tomorrow if we don't act. That's a little extreme and a little dramatic, but
It
we
gets your
do
attention
that.
though.
But it gets your attention because it's real galvanizing to see, on Thursday afternoon, Brett failed to blank, blank, blank. That's pretty galvanizing. And
I
so
love that.
I know the root of your question is coaching. Honestly, it's my experience, those leaders that don't have that mindset and behavior self-select, or the board selects them out pretty fast.
So I'm writing this down. So what I'm hearing is kind of you're painting 2 pictures. And so any business leader or mom and dad, anybody listening to this right now could sit down and say, okay, based on what I'm doing right now, we can go as small as exercise, your eating, leadership, whatever you want to call it, right? Here's if I keep doing this path, here's what's going to happen. Boom, 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 right? List them out. Or I can adapt and go to this path. Boom, 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 boom. Here's what's going to happen. Now I have to sit and reflect and look at these 2 things and say, which do I prefer?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's really, really an important process. And we all should do that. And that's where that meditation time comes in, and that stillness. Everybody gets off on being busy, busy, busy. And I just think that's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
We should really
agree.
reflect. And exactly what you just said, that's the way the way to think about it.
So when you think about it, let's go back to that meditation visualization thing. Walk us through that. You got your coffee, you're in bed for this part, and are you literally just kind of breathing and trying to let your mind go nowhere? Or are you letting your mind go to certain things that you need to really focus on?
Yeah, 2 parts. I think everything begins with gratitude. So I've got a gratitude list that I just run through. My kids, my wife, my firm, my team. So I'm just running through. I've got a pretty fixed gratitude list. So I just kind of run through the gratitude list. The second is I've tried lots of different models in my silence, or let's call it meditation. I just go where I go, and wherever I go. Some days it's improving my punch list and improving the things I need to do by 10 o'clock in my honeydew list, or, paint the house, walk the dog, whatever. And sometimes it's there. Other times it's like really big, beefy things about myself. It's really big, beefy things around concepts about self-improvement, or maybe somebody on my team that I want to coach. And so gratitude is pretty fixed. There's a 8 or 12 little touch points that I hit there. That's really very fixed. After that, I was coached by a coach. Just let it go. Let the whatever you believe in do its work. And that's kind of what I do. And I do believe that's God in me, and that's wherever I go. And sometimes God's okay with me working on a grocery list, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right. Every day does not have to be, exploring the bowels of my creation. I can really just think about, okay, I got to mow the yard. So time to get up and get going, or whatever the case may be. But
driven people, they'll struggle with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I struggle with that sometimes, where it's like, I just wasn't as productive. And then I beat myself up over a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that self-awareness and self-care. Yeah. I mean, if we can't care for ourselves, we can't care for others. I firmly believe that. And particularly, you mentioned men, there are so many men that are just like driven and scheduled. It's a pity often that they have not taken enough time for self-care, and women are very good at that. Not to put too many gender stereotypes on it. But men struggle with that. And that's a shame.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, just very briefly, but I catch this, and I think we want to make a point of this, as you said that your coach, right? Your coach coached you.
Yeah.
You coach people, right? Mm-hmm. And again, let's go back to Michael Jordan or Michael Phelps or Tom Brady or whoever. The best of the best of the best have coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about that, what advice would you have for somebody listening to this today that doesn't have a coach, but wants to go to that next level? Why did you hire a coach and what do you get out of it?
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of coaching, mentorship, whatever you want to call it. I think having a non-aligned outsider giving you perspective is critical. And so
Yep.
I say non-aligned because you might have a COO who, you guys can talk really honestly with each other, but you're aligned and your decisions impact their outcomes.
Yeah.
So I talk about it in the context of non-aligned. I think it's critically important to have a non-aligned outside perspective in your life. And even your wife or partner is aligned. So I think there's high value in that. So what I get out of it is just clarity of thought and helping me. I still struggle with confidence. I still struggle with my own head trash. And are people really going to believe me? And are people really going to believe the wisdom that I give? And then also just in growing my business, I didn't really to grow the way I need to grow. I need to market and be more aggressive and ask for the sale. I've built my business on referrals and reputation, and now I'm pivoting. So my coach really helps me with that it is okay to go out and market and promote yourself and do it in a very classy and organic way. The other thing my coach does is paints a picture of a vision of a future that I can get excited about. I can get enthusiastic about that. So those are kind of three things that I think I get a lot from my coach in order to sort of paint that vision, clarify the offerings that I bring, but then also helping me get out of my own way and my own self-doubt.
Yeah. I like it. So let's talk about this and maybe your meditation, your gratitude list, affirmations and all that. But what about when I say enjoy the journey, right? You mentioned kids earlier. I don't know how old your children are, but those of us that are in the depths of camps here and games there and stuff in the morning, stuff at night, work during the day, right? You're in that kind of sandwich into all this stuff. How have you slowed down or did you slow down to enjoy the journey and make the most of it?
Yeah. So I am a passionate sailor. So I love to sail. So I love to sail offshore. I am trying to do that now and sail more. I'm in Central Texas, so I'm on a lake, but we've got a boat, down in the Caribbean. And so I want to teach. So that's the next thing I want to do. I want to take men that are, that want to be great dads and want to expose their kids to the water, and they want to sail and they want to fish and dive and snorkel and go to cool experiences. I want to teach people how to do that. And so for me, that's the journey. That's the enjoyment. Coaching people through crisis and helping people in crisis those days are numbered for me. Helping people find the journey that I found and the love that I have for the water and the love that I have for sailing and particularly offshore sailing, that's really where I want to go. So the journey, I lived this phrase for a long time, is that I was in my first marriage and I've remarried. And that was a big change for me and a hugely positive change is my new wife, is that we let life live us in our previous marriage. And I've decided fundamentally to change that. I'm going to live life and I'm going to manifest the things that I want. And so now I've built a successful firm and now I want to teach sailing. And there's a lot of ego that gets wrapped up in that, because might not be a 6-7 figure career. And I need to kind of be okay with that. And I might not travel 200 nights a year and be executive platinum on American because that's how I used to validate myself. And so now I can kind of do it with, Brett and his family had an amazing vacation and they wouldn't have been able to do that without the way I coached. So that's awesome. Obtuse answer to how I sort of do it, but really intentional about loving what I'm doing.
And so you're following your passions, right? I mean, you can see the sailboat right behind you. I mean, it's a passion of yours.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that if you can live in your passion, that's a big deal. Huge deal.
Absolutely.
So talk to us about your book, Critical Moments, A New Mindset for Reputation Management. Tell us about that. What brought that on? Obviously, it's what you do for a living, but tell us about it.
Yeah, so the book, the story of the book starts on a cocktail napkin flying home from New York, and that's kind of where it
Hmm.
began. And so I had just finished a crisis engagement with an amazingly dynamic female CEO. It was about a 7-day episode. They kind of got caught in the crosshairs. The details don't really matter. Got caught in the crosshairs, and she did a really nice job of managing and leading that mindset and behavior that we talked about. She really got it and managed us through really, really well. That crucible threw us together in a very sort of, a really strong, fast friendship. And so, as a good consultant, way back when, I was using lots and lots of jargon, is that I was making this distinction about reputation versus brand, reputation management, that it should be no different than HR management or portfolio management, or there should be a practice. And she goes,
Yeah.
finally, we were debriefing on a Friday at the end of it. And she said, Bill, yeah, I've heard you've been talking about that for a week, but I don't really understand what the heck you're talking about. So can you just explain it to me very clearly? And so I bumbled around, and it was a really bad conversation. And she said, time out. What I need, and you may be familiar with this, she said, what I need is I need something like the 4 C's of or 4 P's of marketing: price, product, place, promotion. She wanted a model just like that. And that's a
Yep.
1960s innovation.
Sure.
And so I flew home and I crafted the 4 A's of reputation management, which is awareness, assessment, authority, and then action. And then I wanted to expand that further and decided to write a book about it with some parables from things that I've done in my career. But really, that reputation is an asset, just like any other asset in a corporation can be
Yep.
managed, meaning you can assign KPIs to it, you can assign people to it, and you can assign budget to it. And so I created this model, just like janitorial supplies, treasury management, or legal management. There's a model and a system and a process. And so we have applied that to reputation management so that it can be dealt with just like anything else in a corporation. So
Love
that's
it.
the
So where
journey
do
of the book.
assuming you can get on any major platform?
Absolutely. Yep. Critical Moments. There's a criticalmomentsbook.com is out there, but it's also available. The easiest and best way is Amazon, obviously. But then you can also get it at our corporate website, kith.co.
Perfect. Well, besides your own book and besides the Bible, you got a lot of books back there. You can't use those two. What's your favorite book? Any recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, we referenced it earlier. This Trusted Advisor book by David Maister is really a terrific book. Simon Sinek, the Why book, is a great book.
Yep.
I think Atomic Habits by Clear is
Yep.
fabulous. I think there's you took the Bible away from me. There's a Falling Upwards by Richard Rohr is a great book. He's a Jesuit priest, and so it's a lot about the second half of your life and how do you come back from a turmoil. It was really important to me after my divorce. So it's a handful.
Check out Chase the Lion. Have you ever read
Chase the Lion? No, yeah. I love it.
Chase the Lion is a phenomenal book, and I just got done reading it, and it was really, really good. So Chase the Lion. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name right now. I apologize, but it's on there. So where do our listeners find more of Bill Coletti?
So our corporate website, as in, it's funny, the websites are now kind of old school, but kith.co, kith.co is our website. A lot of information there. Pretty active on Twitter, really active on LinkedIn. We try to share a pretty thoughtful, deep post around both crisis response, but also about mindset and behavior of leaders on LinkedIn, both under my name, Bill Coletti. So those 3 places. And then, I actually like talking to people on the phone. So you can find our phone number and set up an appointment. So I love just sharing and talking about this and having conversations with smart people like you. So I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, Bill, it's been awesome having you, man. I've taken 2 pages of notes, a lot of good stuff, and I know our listeners will find tremendous value in this. So appreciate your time, and appreciate you listeners out there tuning in every single week to listen to us on the Circuit of Success. So, Bill, thanks for being with us, and have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody.